In this episode, mysterious musical legends, lost instruments, and secrets of ancient musical masters. Mankind has done many wonderful things throughout its history. Paintings, literature, architectural ensembles, scientific inventions, and much more. But probably there is no more mysterious art in history than music. The debate about when it first appeared is still ongoing. Historians can only speculate. But in addition to scientific hypotheses, there's also folklore, which holds many surprising and mysterious legends about it. Who is now reviving the musical heritage of the nomads? And what mysteries does it keep? Features of national music. Nomad tools are very portable, no huge ones like a harp or a grand piano. Lost musical heritage. We have lost the craftsmanship. We do not have masters, we do not have musicians, and unfortunately, the musical pieces are not preserved. What secrets are kept by the ancient Kazakh legends about music? There is also a legend about the origin of sibazgi, flute associated with the name of Alexander the Great. Watch all this right now. When it comes to Kazakh folk music, the first thing that comes to mind is dombra and kobyz. These musical instruments are familiar to almost everyone since childhood, but do you know amazing legends about their origin? Moreover, Kazakh musical art is much richer than it seems and keeps many secrets. My name is Andrei Slozhin, it is the Time Puzzle, and today we will go on a musical journey along with the mysteries of history. In the modern world, music accompanies us almost everywhere, in the car, public transport, at home, at work, and on vacation. There are many different genres of this art. We're used to it, that we don't even suspect that music is one of the most mysterious inventions of mankind. Various scientists are still arguing when it appeared. According to the most common theory, music appeared in Africa about 50,000 years ago. Historians call it prehistoric. Moreover, it was not a usual instrument, performance, or vocals, but chants to the sound of rain or the chirping of insects. In general, this theory of the appearance of the first melodies is inclined to the fact that a person began to copy the sounds of nature. Ancient people considered music the mystical gift of the gods and believed that it could affect fate. But at what point did musical instruments replace the sounds of nature? Thus, according to some historians, the very first musical instrument was a flute, although at the very beginning it looked more like a whistle. Surprisingly, the findings of archaeologists say that the first flutes appeared about 40,000 years BC. However, many researchers are inclined to believe that the flute is not the first instrument, since it is difficult to manufacture. The first musical instruments were drums or things similar to them, whether it was a hollow log or a dried and stretched animal's skin. Although there is an opinion that at that time drum was not considered a musical instrument, it was used for communication or hunting. But if you follow this logic, then two sticks or two stones, which beat against each other, should also be considered musical instruments. Similar disputes are still ongoing. However, historians are unanimous in the opinion that the distribution of the first musical instruments was almost simultaneous across all continents. This is evidenced by the cave paintings of ancient people. Petroglyphs were also discovered in Kazakhstan, where primitive musicians and instruments are depicted. Yelenara Aydarkhanova, registrar at Ikhlas Museum of Folk Musical Instruments, told us all about it.
Тас бетіндегі бейнелер петроглифтер деп аталады. Енді негізі
The very first image of the instrument can be called a petroglyph, in which the dombra and 5 people dancing around it are captured. Judging by the poses depicted, they performed some kind of ritual dance. The stone belongs to the Bronze Age. It was found in the Maytobi area of the Jambul district of the Almaty region. The second such stone was discovered later in the Ulitau district of Zhezkazgan region. It is considered a stone of a shaman. Petroglyph depicts a dancing shaman, and there are animals around it. Camels, dogs, there are also musical instruments. There are images of a mythical nature. The peculiarity of the petroglyph is that it is carved in dots.
сәті және оның айналасында жан-жағында соның ішінде түйелер, иттер және де музыкалық аспаптар және мифтік негіздегі бейнелер тастың бетіне бір ерекшелігі нүктелі айтсақ точно орнамент белгіленген бұл.
However, these drawings on stones do not mean that dombra was the first instrument in nomadic culture. According to the legends that were passed from mouth to mouth among the nomads, the very first nomadic instruments were also wind instruments.
негізінен сол аспаптар Қазақстан әр аймағында да.
Such instruments are found during excavations throughout Kazakhstan. The oldest of them were found in Otrar and Taraz.
Сонымен қатар мысалы
For example, the wheel deck was found during excavations of the Kuyurik Tobe settlement in Otrar.
қазба жұмыстарын жүргізу нәтижесінде табылған, олардың да жасалу ішіне күрделі мысалы.
The manufacturing method and the shape of the instrument are quite complex. It was not only molded out of clay, but also sand was added to the composition.
Пештің температурасында
After molding, the preform was fired in a furnace at a certain temperature. Kerne dates back to a later period in history. A sample of the instrument was discovered on a private territory in 1968 by a resident of Almaty, Awaz Sultankulov. Subsequently, the sample was lost but was again found during excavations in 1996. A little later, it was given to the director of the museum, Izbasar Baltagululi. Generally, the most popular nomadic wind instruments were sazsernay, sabazgi, and kerne. It is not known for certain exactly when they appeared and which of them was the first, since we don't have any written sources. However, historians managed to restore their destiny. So, for example, kerne was related to military tools. It was used to give signals. With the help of this tool, they give commands to one or another unit of the nomadic army.
Қазақ халқының музыкалық аспаптары алғашын саз балшықтан жасалынған дедік, кейінірек арнайы ағаштан.
Sazsernay was made from clay and animal hair. This was primarily a toy for children. A child could play simple melodies on his own. As already mentioned, the first Kazakh folk instruments were molded out of clay. Then they began to be cut out of wood, reeds. So the first wind instruments became widespread. Among them, it is worth noting sibazgi, a pipe which also has rich history, along with kobiz and dombra. The tool is characterized by a simple manufacturing technique. It was especially popular among shepherds. A skilled craftsman could make a good flute from a suitable stock in 10 to 15 minutes. It was enough to clean the stock and make several holes in it. However, they didn't use just any stems, but only from grown strong plants. And so that the flute could be used as long as possible, it was wrapped in intestines. This contributed not only to the storage of the tool, but also protected from physical damage. Later, when stalks weren't enough anymore, the craftsmen began to cut those instruments out of wood. At the same time, they selectively chose raw materials. A similar tool was found in Altai. The Bashkirs and Tatars played on it. They only called it kuray, like the reed, from which it was made. The ways of making this musical instrument among Kazakhs, Bashkirs, and Tatars were similar. The cultural figure of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Abdul Hamid Raimbergenov, told us all about it. The inside of the reed stem was cut out, then 2 to 3 holes were burned. The hardest part was probably to extract the sound because it is not so simple. Moreover, the performance added their voice to the sounds of the instrument, and they got two-voiced sound. Sibazgi was widespread in Kazakhstan until the 18th century. In the past, the stool was considered mandatory among hunters and batirs. Sibazgi was so popular that there are many legends about it. One of them says that thanks to Sibazgi, one boy managed to escape from death. The head of the scientific department of the Museum of Folk Musical Instruments, named after Ikhlas Jansaya Kojakan, told us that legend.
Аңыз бойынша ол кісінің басында екі мүйізі болған екен. Және де ол өзінің шашын алып.
There is also a legend about the origin of Sibazgi,
жайып қоймасын деген ниетпен.
flute associated with the name of Alexander the Great. Legend says that this king had horns.
Ол шаштараз Ескендір Зұлқарнайынға бара жатқан кезде, оның анасы өзінің омырау үстінен нан пісіріп.
He executed all the barbers who cut his hair, fearing that they would reveal his secret.
Алып келген нанын жеп отырса, Ескендір.
So the turn comes to one young barber.
Көрейін деп жейді.
He goes to the king, and he had the bread that his mother baked,
Бұл неден жасалған деп
adding
сұрағанда,
her
жаңағы
breast milk.
Бұл менің анамның омырау үстінен жасалған деп жауап береді. Яғни екеуі бір ананың үстіне.
After the work done, the boy sat down and began to eat bread. Alexander saw this and wanted to know what the boy was eating. The king ate a piece, he liked it, and he asked what the bread was made from. The boy replied that of his mother's breast milk. Naturally, in this way they became milk brothers. So the king could not execute the barber. Alexander decides to send him to distant deserted lands so that the boy lives there alone and dies by his own death. The boy wandered alone in unknown places for a long time. Once he heard a beautiful melody. He wondered where it came from. On the riverbank, he saw a reed, all eaten by insects. The wind passed through these holes, and so the melody turned out. The boy cut the stem and began to play himself. Soon a caravan passing by nearby heard his music, so the boy was saved. According to historians, such simple wind instruments around the world served as the basis for creating more complex musical instruments of this type. The main merit in this belongs to the ancient Greeks and Romans. It was during the dawn of these civilizations that musical instruments and music became most widespread. The Greeks introduced the very word music. It comes from the word muse, the ancient Greek goddess, the patroness of art and science. The Greeks also deduced the regularity that the pitch depends on the number, a soft or first stave. It is attributed to Pythagoras.
Помимо духовых инструментов, позднее появились и струны.
In addition to wind instruments, strings later appeared. According to some historians, the first one was a harp. Greeks, Romans, Syrian civilization, all of them had harps. The oldest harp belongs to the Sumerian. But how was this tool invented? According to one popular version, the appearance of such a musical instrument was promoted by the usual hunting bow. Ancient people noticed that during the shot, the bow string makes a sound. The sound of a bowstring depends on the length of the bow and the strength of its tension. As a result, they added more strings. It was such primitive harps that became the basis for the invention of all known stringed instruments. And, of course, their appearance also grew into many legends. The similar ones are also found in Kazakh folklore.
Жетіген көпшекті музыкалық аспап бүгінгі таңда да
Жетіген is a multi-stringed instrument which is also very popular at present. There is the following legend about Жетіген. In ancient times, one old man had 7 sons. Unfortunately, they all died during severe winter. After the death of each of them, the Aksakal pulled one string on a piece of wood and played a sad cue. After 7 deaths, this 7-string instrument and the work, woe from the loss of 7 sons, appeared. The name of the instrument implies the words 7 songs. It is placed on knees or flat surface and a melody is extracted. Interestingly, the tone of the sound is regulated by special stands. They were either made of wood or lamb morsels, popularly known as asics.
Да, жетеген и вправду.
Yes, jatigan is indeed a very large tool and inconvenient in transporting from one place of wandering to another, and the Kazakhs always loved music and wanted it to accompany them almost everywhere. It was necessary to invent something more mobile and light.
Инструменты кочевников, они все очень
Nomadic musical instruments are very mobile. There are no huge ones like a harp or a grand piano. Because in a steppe, the instrument had to be small, mobile, so that when moving, it could be carried with you.
собой носили.
So the dombra was born. Archaeological finds indicate that two-string prototypes of the Kazakh dombra appeared more than 2,000 years ago. So during excavations of the ancient settlement Koy Krilgan Kale, built about 2,000 years ago, terracotta figurines of musicians with two strings in their hands were found. However, these are also assumptions.
Жалпы алғанда осы қазақ халқының ұлттық музыкалық аспаптарының нақты қай уақытта қай кезеңде шыққандығы туралы
Unfortunately, there is no exact information about when exactly the Kazakh national instruments appeared. You can only roughly name the periods based on legends or scientific research.
қай халықтың музыкалық аспабын алып қарамасақ та
It is also worth noting that different peoples have similar musical instruments. This can be explained by close cultural and commercial ties.
яғни сауда-саттық байланысына
One of the first to describe this tool was Marco Polo. The traveler said that dombra is an integral attribute of nomad warriors, and that before the battle they play on it and sing songs, thereby tuning into the upcoming battle. Soon, dombra became popular not only among the Batars, it went to the people. Almost every yurt had such instrument. Many legends about it began to appear.
Одна рассказывает о двух братьях, которые решили построить каменный мост через бурную холодную реку. Один брат таскал
One tells of two brothers who decided to build a stone bridge over a stormy cold river. One brother carried boulders.
разозлился.
The other sat on a stone and played the dombra.
Инструмент
The one who worked got angry, grabbed a tool from his brother's hands and hit it hard against the boulder.
щепки.
The dombra shattered into chips and only its imprint remained on the stone.
За много веков
They say that after many centuries it was from this imprint that the Kazakhs recreated this wonderful tool.
замечательный инструмент.
осы домбыра аспап жайлы бүгінге дейін жеткен өте әйгілі аңыз бар. Ол аңыз яғни Жошы ханның ұлына байланысты ақсақ құлан аңызы. Аңыз бойынша Жошы ханның ұлы өзінің достарымен бірге аңшылыққа
Currently everyone knows the legend about dombra, Aksak Kulan,
қаза табады.
associated with the son of Khan Jochi. According to legend, the boy goes hunting with his friends where he dies from being hit by the hoof of a kulan. Han Jochi, worried about the absence of his son, publicly threatens everyone that he would flood the throat with molten lead to someone who dares to bring sad news. None of the subjects dare to notify the Khan, all in fear and confusion. Once, the advisors of the Khan notice a man playing the dombra in the steppe and order him to inform the Khan of the news of his son. This man came to the headquarters and through music explained to Khan Jochi that his son was killed. Han, who understood the meaning of Q, furiously orders to pour lead into his throat, and that person replies that himself did not say a word to the Khan. Everything was retold by his instrument. After that, the lead is poured onto the tool. According to legend, that's how a round hole appeared on the case. It is also said that until that moment, dombra was a multi-stringed instrument. And after this punishment, it had only two strings.
домбыраның көп ішегі болып, ыстық қорғасын құйылғаннан кейін тек екі ішегі ғана қалды деген аңыз бар.
However, there are three-string dombras. One of these is kept in the Ikhlas Museum of Musical Instruments in Almaty. The great writer, translator, public figure, enlightener, and poet Abay Kunanbayev played on it. Coming up next, how is it made? Secrets of craftsmanship.
Не секрет, что создание того или иного инструмента довольно...
It is no secret that the creation of one or another tool is rather complex and laborious process that requires accuracy and scrupulousness. Now, there are a huge number of modern materials and devices that simplify the work of the master, but how in ancient times the same dombra was made? Mairbek Dilmanov, the master of the production of Kazakh national traditional musical instruments, told us about this.
Енді бұрын ата-бабаларымыз аспапты бір ағаштан шауып жасағаннан кейін ол өте көп уақыт.
A single piece of wood served as a blank, so the work took a lot of time. One dombra took from 3 to 6 months to make. Nowadays, one tool can be done in a couple of days. The reason is the development of technology. We do not have to cut and process raw materials manually. Everything's done much faster by machines. Modern tools are not inferior to old ones in quality.
Бұрынғы аспаптан сапасы төмен емес.
In ancient times, Kazakhs used wood species that were in the area where they lived to create musical instruments. So basically, it was coniferous, larch, and pine. But Tianshan spruce was most valued. The instrument from this tree turned out to be light, and the sound was softer and more melodic.
Енді бұрынғы кезде мысалға домбыраны шауып жасаған.
First, it was necessary to cut a blank from wood, and the strings for the dombra were pulled from the guts of livestock. The intestines were pre-treated to achieve the required thickness. Now we use ready-made factory strings, which also affects the speed of work. In this way, all the tools in the steppe were created. They were made by special masters who studied this technique for more than 1 year. Unfortunately, their names were not preserved in archival and historical documents. People knew these masters by face and passed their names by word of mouth. Almost every village had its own craftsman. Of course, there were especially skillful among them. The cost for the tool of such masters was very high.
Бұрын ата-бабамыздан енді тілі әдебиеттен естіп келе жатқанымыз бұрын мысалға үлкен хас шеберлердің.
As far as we know from history and literature in ancient times, the products of skilled craftsmen were not valued for money, but equated in value to a mare, stallion, or camel. So their tools were quite good.
Енді сондай тұрарлықтай аспапты жасаған ғой. Ол аспаптың іші жасағаннан кейін музыкалық инструментте оның дыбысына қоса ол бағасының өсетіні тағы да оның әсемдігі.
The value of the instrument was affected not only by its sound but also by its appearance, decoration with precious stones, decorative ornaments, decoration in gold or silver. Therefore, they could give a camel or a horse for such tools. Also, there was another popular nomadic musical instrument, kobyz. At the very beginning, it was considered a tool of shamans. According to legend, the person who played it could stop time, heal diseases, and even prevent death. According to researchers, kobyz is the progenitor of all bowed instruments. So in the Chinese annals of the Tang Dynasty, which existed from 618 to 907 years of our era, there is a description of the string instrument hutsen, which, according to the chroniclers, was copied from the Turkic kobyz. Also, already in the 20th century, thanks to the research of European scientists Werner Bachmann and Slavoj Donchev, it was proved that kobyz is the oldest bowed string instrument in the world. It was created by Turkic tribes living on the banks of the Sirdarya.
Негізінде мынау аңыздарға ойланып қарасақ, кітаптарыңыздан өзі негізі домбырадан да бұрын шертер деген аспап бірінші шықты.
In general, if you analyze all the legends, it turns out that even before the dombra, there was a tool which was called sherter.
Тер тартылады. Сосын жартылай бет тақтай болады. Сол шертер аспабынан
Half of this body was made of leather. Everything else was wood.
аңыздарда айтылып келеді. Енді сол қобыздың мысалға біз
Legends say that dombra and kobyz originate from the sherter.
біздерге жіберді Қазақстанға.
In Ukraine, they found one ancient instrument and sent its mark up to Kazakhstan, suspecting that it was of Turkic origin. Based on this model, we made a shelter, kobyz and dombra, then sent them to Ukraine. Scientists studied the samples, compared, and came to the conclusion that this is kobyz. For a long time, kobyz was inaccessible to ordinary people. It was forbidden for mere mortals to even touch it. It was considered a mystical instrument, which can be played only by a chosen person with any mystical abilities. Indeed, besides the fact that it can stop time or deceive death, with the help of a kobyz, you can find out the future. So in the folklore of the Kazakh people, there is one legend that just tells about it.
Бір күні жараспақсы үлкен бір іс-шараға тап болады, және ол жерде бәйге ұйымдастырылып жатқан екен. Сол бәйгеге жараспақсы да сұранады. Яғни мен де қатыссам бола ма?
Once Baksi Sharaz attends a major event where they held a horse race baiga.
Сен бәйгеге менді қоспақшысың деп.
Baksi volunteered to take part in the race, but the local rich began to chuckle, saying that, "What is your bet?"
Сен онан да бізге бұл бәйгеден кімнің жеңетінін нақты болжап айтып бер, сонша.
Since Jaras was from the poor, instead he's offered to show his talent and predict who will win the races. He was tied to a tree, freeing only his hands. Baksi Jaras played for a long time on his kobyz and was able to accurately name the future winner. They decided that he would be released if he guesses right, or executed if he makes a mistake. As a result, Baksi Jaras predicted the winner. People showed respect for his ability, and Bais let him go in peace.
Халық оның бақсылық қасиетін бағалап, байлар оны босатқан екен.
Another Kazakh national instrument, which raises a lot of questions among music historians, is called zhlebuaz. Outwardly, it very much resembles a bagpipe. It was used as a rule by shamans in their rites. The nomads did not perceive it as a tool that can be used on celebrations or on ordinary days. It was a strictly ritual instrument. For a long time, it was lost for history, and only thanks to enthusiasm of the musicians it managed to be revived. Abzal Arikbaev, a musician, a member of the Turan ethno-folklore ensemble, told us about this. It is the Kazakh bagpipe. It is practically not used in our country. It just hangs in our museums. This is one of the oldest musical instruments. We know there is a Scottish bagpipe, a Slavic bagpipe, Italian one, and so on. But the Kazakh bagpipe, we almost lost it. We have lost the craftsmanship. We do not have masters. We do not have performance of musicians. And unfortunately, the musical works are not preserved. But certain sources of historians and scholars who describe this tool have been preserved. Moreover, they describe that each nomadic ethnic group, which are not only Kazakhs but Kyrgyz, Tuvenians, Mongols, and so on, every nation had this instrument. Because these nomads were engaged in cattle breeding, the tool was made, roughly speaking, from natural materials. This is leather, and, of course, reed. Now, experts are studying this tool and are looking for evidence of it in historical documents of other nations. So it was possible to establish that the first descriptions of a similar tool were made by the ancient Greeks in the 400 year BC. As a result, it has undergone changes and improvements among different nations. Nomads, for example, playing on it, also added guttural singing. It is a many-voiced musical instrument, which is characteristic of the Turkic peoples, who own the Burdan polyphony both in musical instruments and in epic voice singing. Throat singing, guttural singing, kurkureme, kargara, kome, tamakmen, kailao. There are a huge number of different names of this art. It is believed that this is one of the oldest forms of singing chants. It was the heroic epics that were performed in this way. Throat singing was used in shamanistic rites and rituals. There is an opinion that throat singing was still known during the Scythian period, during the Huns, Turks, and of course, the present Kazakhs. Coming up next, how Kazakhs taught their children music and how the melodies of nomads differ from the music of other nations.
Для тех, кто не знаком с нотной грамотой, расскажу. Существует 7 нот, которые...
For those who are not familiar with musical notations, I'll tell you there are 7 that form an octave. There are several octaves, each has its own name and they vary in sound, from the lowest note to the highest. This is the basis of all musical works. Using notes, music is recorded on paper. The ancient nomads did not use any notes. But how, then, did these ancient works reach us? The musical culture of the Kazakh people is very rich. Today there are 10,000 pieces of music. All these works were transmitted, of course, from generation to another, from century to another, precisely by oral means. That is, we did not have musical notations before the organization of the Soviet Union. Since then, a small amount of musical material has been preserved. The thing is that learning music was not of any professional nature for the Kazakhs. The child listened to the play of adults, perceived the melody by ear, memorized the movement of the hands, and then reproduced it all on his own. Each yurt had a dombra.
Если взять про меня, конечно, я с детства рос в этой семье. Я с детства...
If you take me, I grew up in a musical family since childhood. My grandfather was a student of Kazakhs himself. He studied with him. From 3 to 4 years old, I sat on my grandfather's lap and listened to these melodies. I did not memorize anything. Apparently, it was recorded in the subconscious mind every day from childhood. The pieces of music were, of course, adopted by ear, because it is a unique memory. Of course, it was all worked out from childhood. And when there was no written language, it was necessary to be able to keep everything in mind. Nomads taught their children this from childhood. It went from father to son to grandson, and sometimes the main performance criterion was not the skill of an individual musician, but how exactly he could convey this or that melody. However, in a nomadic society, there were gifted children, especially predisposed to professional music. To this talent did not go to waste. Parents gave their children to experienced musicians for education, and it was not just training, but practically obedience.
В степи существовала степная школа, наверное, Устаз Шакирт, учитель и ученик. Но это, наверное, не такая.
There was a step school model, Ustaz Shakirt, teacher and pupil. This is probably not the kind of school we are used to now. We go to a music school, we study, go to a certain course, then leave. No, a student went to a teacher and lived with him. A child traveled with him along villages, grew up with him, and he did not learn music only, but also conversations with people, life experience, everything came from the teacher. And when the teacher felt that he had given the student everything he could give, he could say, I give you bata, blessing. Now you go to another teacher. Now you have to go to this school. And he goes to another teacher until he himself becomes a master. There was such a school. The training lasted depending on the abilities of the child. In addition to the music itself, the teacher conveyed accumulated knowledge to the student. The history of the people and individuals, legends and tales.
В инструментальной музыке существовали уже профессиональные жанры. Это жанр Акжелен, это жанр Коспасар, это жанр Толгау.
In instrumental music, there were professional genres. These are Akjelen, Kospasar, Tolgao, and the singers have terme. Now they were already composed as professional genres, which had their own form, their content, their own way. And in this mode, musical pieces were composed. There is a genre Akjelen. According to legend, each performer had to first play 62 Akjelens. Only after playing 62 Akjelens, he could compose cues. Until he plays these 62 Akjelens, he supposedly did not go through his study. Many composers, after mastering this genre, composed their own Akjelens. Kurmangazi Akjelen, Daulet Kere Akjelen, Kazakhs also composed many Akjelens. Despite this approach to learning to play musical instruments, many works were lost. Now musicians and historians are working hard to recreate the tunes of the past. We revive them precisely by no improvisation, but by scientific approach. We are like scientists. We study notes, we study legends, we study some scientific researches. After that, we also talk with our teachers, with professors, doctors, and so on. And we let it all through ourselves. That is, we begin to play it all. And there is such an interesting, peculiar interpretation that we receive as a result. A lot of important information is kept by old-timers and elders who can remember the ancient cue, and not just the melody itself, but also their history, because the performance of musical works from antiquity was also accompanied by an important narrative.
Каждый исполнитель, который играет, он обязательно говорит. Он обязательно говорит, у кого он учился, что за произведение.
He always says who his teacher was, what kind of musical piece he was going to play. He also had to tell when it was composed, why it was composed, to introduce probably a listener into this image. And after that, he began to play when the viewer fully understood the background. There is a certain layer of musical works in which a certain history of the data of some events is transmitted. There are certain rules. The musician first tells the legend, then begins to perform, but always in solo. For example, Aksakulan Q. It was performed solo, only on a dombra. Q is called Aksakulan. The author is Kedboga. Similarly, the musical works of many Kazakh composers were revived, including Kurmangazi and Korkut. Now they are performed by modern musicians, both solo and in ensemble. By the way, the group performance of Kazakh music is an inclusively modern invention. The Kazakh people never had an ensemble, never had an orchestra. There was practically no ensemble game. Musicians always performed solo.
Еще одной особенностью казахской музыки является...
Another feature of Kazakh music is the rhythm. There is an opinion that there is no rhythm. There is a fundamentally false statement. There is a rhythm, only it is not the same as in classical works. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The rhythm in Kazakh music, it is deep, as indeed the whole philosophy of the Kazakhs. One work it can change several times. In the melody you can hear, for example, a herd of horses, or a faint breeze blowing, or a river slowly flowing. As the Kazakhs say, one can hear it only with one's heart. Kazakh music also does not stand still. Modern performers continue the traditions of the past, but at the same time invest in creativity and modern trends. For example, a musician, a member of the ethno-jazz band Stepsons, Tohtar Nurmoldaev, created a work that reflects the life story of one ruler.
Шөл сұлтаны бұл шығармада біз өзіміздің жаңағы Мысыр патшасы бейбарыс жайлы айтқымыз келді. Оның өмірбаянын жеткізгіміз келді.
In the work Step Sultan, we want to talk about the life of the Egyptian ruler Baybars. This is a famous person, lived in the 13th century. He ruled the Mamluks.
Қыпшақ жерінде құлдыққа түскен болатын.
He turned the Mamluk state into a major power. He was a skilled commander. As a child, he fell captive in the Kipchak steppes. He fell into slavery, later became a vizier under the ruler of Egypt, and then headed the state.
Мұсылмандардың қорғаны өйткені жағы крест жорығы сонымен қатар Моңғол
History says that he was a protector of Muslims. He defended Muslim countries during the Crusades and the Mongol invasion.
өмірінің соңында оны жағы өзінің
It is believed that he was poisoned by his advisor. Shortly before his death, he said that he was ready to give up the throne for the opportunity to rebreathe the aroma of native steppes.
елімнің жағы жусан иісін иіскесем болды деп.
This piece of music is a prime example of how ancient traditions and modernity can be combined. Here, great attention is paid to the Kazakh rhythm. The listener can understand without words when the Sultan was captured, feel his formation as a ruler, and, of course, hear the longing for his native steppes.
Жалпы менің ойымша біздің жаңалығымыз ол негізі біздің
The peculiarity of our team is that we do not perform pure ethnicity, but ethnic jazz. Therefore, the composition also has jazz chords. Our goal is to present a new sound for ethnicity. Now you will hear how we managed to combine ethnic and jazz.
қалай үйлескен.
Бесспорно, казахская музыкальная культура...
Undoubtedly, the Kazakh musical culture is rich and original, but at the same time, it still contains many secrets and mysteries, which I'm sure will still be revealed and will sound to the whole world with the voice of Dombra and Kobiz. My name is Andrei Slozhin. It was the Time Puzzle. See you.